Think your pet is your best friend? Think again. From exotic creatures to household pets, we're diving into the most bone-chilling real-life stories of owners who met their end at the hands or paws of the animals they loved. Brace yourself for an hour of jaw-dropping, disturbing tales that will make you see your furry companions in a whole new light. This is 1 hour of most disturbing deaths of owners killed by their pets. It was March 5, 2019, in the quiet village of Zdekov, located in eastern Czech Republic. Michael Prysek, a 34-year-old local resident, entered his pet lion's enclosure for unknown reasons. But he never made it out of the cage, at least not alive, marking a grim end to his hobby of breeding dangerous predators in his backyard. But what happened? Michal Prysek was well known in his village for his unconventional choice of pets. It's safe to say that his passion made him unpopular. Locals feared his animals, but Michal was hell-bent on having his way and keeping his beloved exotic pets, a lion and a lioness. He had purchased the male lion 3 years prior from Slovakia. The lioness was acquired 2 years after that, in 2018. Michal kept these lions in homemade cages on his property, apparently for breeding purposes. Despite numerous complaints from concerned neighbors and fines from local authorities for lacking the necessary permits and building permissions, Michal continued to keep and breed these dangerous animals. To top things off, he would often take the lions out on walks in his neighborhood. As such, incidents involving the lions were not uncommon. In June 2018, the community was further enraged when a cyclist collided with Prysek's lioness while he was taking her for a walk on a leash. The cyclist was injured and required hospital treatment. But the incident was classified as a traffic accident after police intervention. It didn't matter to Michal that his whole community wanted him to give up his pets, and there was little that authorities could do about the matter. They had previously fined Prysek for illegal breeding and constructing enclosures without proper permits, but their efforts to remove the animals legally were hampered by a lack of alternative facilities for the lions and the absence of evidence suggesting animal cruelty. As such, the situation was at a stalemate because Michal refused access to his property and the authorities were unable to take further action under existing laws. But it all changed on a fateful Tuesday morning. The maintenance of lions in captivity, especially in non-professional settings, is a huge risk, something Michal learned in the worst possible way. It was about 7 a.m. when Michal Prysek's father discovered his son's lifeless body inside the male lion's cage. But what happened? It appeared that the cage was locked from the inside. This meant that 34-year-old Michal had voluntarily entered and then found himself trapped. Michal's father alerted the authorities. When the police arrived, however, they were faced with a serious matter. In order to reach and recover Michal's lifeless body, they needed to face the predators. And while lions are part of the big cat family, they are far from their domesticated cousins. Lions are large carnivores. They are known for their strength and their hunting prowess. They are apex predators, meaning they are at the top of the food chain. As such, unarmed humans pose little threat to these powerful animals. To ensure the safety of the responders and to access the victim, the police made the difficult decision to shoot both lions. A police spokesperson later stated that the action was absolutely necessary. Prysek's death was officially pronounced by a doctor who arrived at the scene shortly after the police. His body was then sent for an autopsy to confirm the exact cause of death. As it turned out, the lioness was pregnant at the time, adding a further layer of tragedy to the incident. Despite the tragedy, some in the village were able to breathe more easily after the incident. Zdekov Mayor Tomas Kokurek remarked that this tragic incident might finally bring about a resolution to the long-standing issue. As a result of Michal's death, the Czech government then indicated that it was considering changes to the laws regulating the ownership and breeding of predatory animals in order to prevent similar situations in the future. At least at the time, the Czech Republic was a hub for illegal wildlife smuggling. It was a quiet afternoon in April 2006 in Danforth Township, Minnesota. Cynthia Lee Gamble, a 52-year-old wildlife enthusiast, was tending to her beloved tigers on her 80-acre property. She dedicated her life to caring for exotic animals, creating a sanctuary for many wild felines, including Bengal tigers. Her passion for these creatures drove her life, but on this day, it led to a tragic end. Cynthia's love for wildlife began as a nature photographer. She loved capturing the beauty of animals through her lens. Over the years, this passion grew, and she founded the Center for Endangered Species. Originally located in Hugo, Minnesota, the center later moved to Pine County near Sandstone. Cynthia's work gained recognition, with her cats appearing on shows like NBC's Today Show and even in Hollywood movies. Her center's website highlighted the trained cat's abilities to pose for cameras and perform stunts. Despite her extensive experience, Cynthia knew the risks. However, on that day, her routine work turned deadly. While cleaning the cage of a 500-pound Bengal tiger, she accidentally left one of the drop doors open. This small mistake had fatal consequences. The tiger attacked Cynthia from behind. The scene was horrifying. A man who came to work on the property found Cynthia's lifeless body later that day. The tiger had mauled her to death. Authorities were notified, and the Pine County Sheriff's Office, along with emergency personnel, rushed to the scene. The tiger was euthanized, and its body was sent to the University of Minnesota Veterinary Hospital for examination. Cynthia's body was taken to the Ramsey County Medical Examiner's Office for an autopsy. Cynthia's death shocked the community. She was known for her dedication to wildlife conservation and was a prominent figure in the world of exotic animal care. Her tragic end sparked a heated debate about the safety and ethics of keeping big cats as pets. Exotic animal attacks had been rising in Minnesota in those times. In April 2005, 4 tigers mauled a woman in southeastern Minnesota. These incidents raised concerns about the safety of both the animals and the people who cared for them. Cynthia's work was always under scrutiny. While some admired her dedication to the animals, others questioned the ethics of her practices. Her center's website mentioned their cats were trained for stunt actions, mock attacks, snarling, leaping, jumping, running, and climbing. This raised questions about the true nature of her work and whether it was genuinely in the animal's best interest. Carol Baskin, the founder of Big Cat Rescue in Tampa, Florida, was vocal about her opposition to private ownership of big cats. She believed these animals should not be kept by individuals and that the United States Department of Agriculture's inspection process was insufficient to ensure safety and proper care. Baskin argued that incidents like Cynthia's death showed the need for stricter regulations and the establishment of sanctuaries that prioritized the animal's well-being. On the other hand, some, like Zuzana Kukol, an exotic animal owner and trainer from Las Vegas, defended responsible big cat ownership. Kukol pointed out that the chances of being killed by a captive large cat were extremely low, much lower than winning the lottery. She believed media hysteria unfairly painted all big cat owners as irresponsible. Cynthia's death also brought attention to the lack of regulations in Pine County. Unlike many other counties in the state, Pine County did not have ordinances restricting the ownership of exotic animals. This gap in regulation left room for incidents like Cynthia's to occur, prompting local authorities to reconsider their stance on exotic animal ownership. Tammy Quist, the executive director of the nearby Wildcat Sanctuary, was called to the scene with a tranquilizer gun, but arrived too late to save Cynthia. Quist had long advocated for the establishment of true sanctuaries that provided a safe haven for these animals. She saw Cynthia's death as a tragic but necessary wake-up call for the community to address the dangers of private big cat ownership. Cynthia's son, a 14-year-old boy, lived with her on the property. Losing his mother in such a brutal manner would undoubtedly have a lasting impact on him. Authorities did not disclose whether the boy had witnessed the attack, but the emotional toll on him was undeniable. The aftermath of Cynthia's death led to increased scrutiny of exotic animal facilities in Minnesota. Local officials like Roger Nelson, vice chairman of the Pine County Board, acknowledged the need for better regulations to ensure the safety of both the animals and the public. The incident also fueled ongoing debates about the ethics of keeping wild animals in captivity and the responsibilities of those who chose to do so. As authorities and animal welfare advocates continued to grapple with the implications of Cynthia's death, one thing was clear: the tragic end of a woman who dedicated her life to wildlife conservation would not be forgotten. On June 5, 2019, tragedy struck at 8 p.m. in Kruger National Park, known for its wild beauty. 2-year-old Courtney Netamun, a little boy filled with laughter and curiosity, found himself in the clutches of a nightmare that would haunt his family and the park for years to come. Courtney's father, Isaiah Entemain, was a hard-working man, spending his days as a water operator within the park's sprawling expanse. His wife, Sabine, often brought their son to visit him, turning his simple cottage into a haven of love and laughter amidst the rugged terrain. On the day of the tragedy, Isaiah returned home from work, eager to spend time with his family. Ever the adventurous spirit, Courtney followed his father's footsteps, his tiny hand clutching a toy truck as he explored the world around him. As evening descended, Isaiah settled into the routine of family life, unaware of the danger lurking just beyond the safety of his doorstep. Courtney, drawn by the allure of the wilderness, went outside in the night, his innocent curiosity leading him into a world of danger. Suddenly, the evening shattered with the sound of a mother's screams, echoing through the darkness like a cry for help. Isaiah rushed outside, his heart pounding with dread, only to find his worst fears realized. In the grasp of a leopard was his beloved son, his cries for help drowned out by the predator's roar. The leopard bit Courtney's neck and body repeatedly, his cries and screams getting louder as he could feel the pain course through his tiny body. Isaiah acted in sheer terror, his every instinct screaming to protect his child at all costs. With a courage born of desperation, he confronted the leopard, his hands shaking as he fought to free his son from the jaws of death. As the struggle raged on, Sabine joined the fray, her screams blending with Isaiah's as they fought tooth and nail to save their precious son. Isaiah managed to drive the leopard away with a final desperate effort, but the damage had already been done. In the aftermath of the attack, Courtney lay battered and broken, his tiny body bearing the scars of a battle fought and lost. With tears streaming down their faces, Isaiah and Sabine rushed their son to the hospital, praying for a miracle that would never come. Despite the best efforts of the doctors, Courtney succumbed to his injuries, his tiny heart beating its last as his parents looked on in agony. In the wake of his death, Kruger National Park was plunged into mourning, its vast expanse of wilderness overshadowed by the specter of loss and grief. After the brutal attack on Courtney, the rangers and park staff searched for the leopard, where the animal was considered a danger to humans and had to be killed immediately. The park rangers successfully located the leopard and shot it, ending the threat of it harming other people inside the park's premises. As the days turned into weeks, questions lingered like ghosts, haunting the minds of all who sought answers in the wake of Courtney's tragic demise. How had a leopard managed to breach the park's defenses? What measures could be taken to prevent such a tragedy from occurring again? Some speculated that human encroachment into the leopard's natural habitat had emboldened the animal. In contrast, others pointed to the inherent risks of living and working near wild predators. Beyond the tragedy of Courtney's death lies a story of a vibrant young life cut short by the merciless whims of nature. Courtney was not just a victim. He was a beloved son, a cherished family member, and a bright spark in all who knew him. His laughter and smile, once a source of boundless joy, now serve as bittersweet memories cherished by those who loved him most. It was 2004 in Dortmund, Germany. Mark Vogel, a 30-year-old man living alone, had a rather unusual passion. He collected exotic and often dangerous animals. Mark's small apartment housed over 200 spiders, several snakes, lizards, and even thousands of termites. His prized pet was a black widow spider named Bettina. Unlike most people, Mark found comfort in these creatures, and his home was more like a live-in horror movie set than a typical living space. Mark was a loner who kept his unusual hobby private. He rarely had visitors and limited his interactions with neighbors. Over time, things took a dark turn. His neighbors began to notice a terrible smell coming from his apartment. Days passed, and the odor only intensified, prompting them to call the police. When the authorities arrived and opened the door, they were met with a chilling sight. The apartment was dim, lit only by a green glow from the numerous terrariums scattered around. Webs filled every corner and spiders roamed freely across the surfaces. But the most horrifying discovery was Mark's lifeless body on the sofa, wrapped in webs. Spiders crawled out of his nose and mouth, and larger chunks of his flesh had been devoured by the lizards and tarantulas. It was clear Mark had been dead for some time, possibly as long as 2 weeks. The smell that had alarmed the neighbors was a mixture of Mark's decomposing body and the odor of his pets. The scene was so disturbing that officers compared it to something out of the Silence of the Lambs. In one corner, a tarantula had even built a nest the size of a bird's in the ceiling. The apartment was a nightmare filled with creatures that had no place in a regular home. Spider expert and animal cruelty officer Gabby Bayer was called in to assess the situation. What she found shocked her. Mark had kept creatures that were so dangerous she compared them to pit bulls. The venom of a black widow spider is 15 times stronger than that of a rattlesnake, though fatalities are rare. Unfortunately, Mark was not so lucky. The police believed that Bettina, his black widow spider, had bitten Mark. The venom incapacitated him, leaving him unable to defend himself. Once he was down, his other pets began to feed on his body. It was a horrific end for a man whose love for dangerous creatures had gone too far. Mark's neighbors described him as a reclusive man who was obsessed with his pets. He spent most of his time caring for them and had little contact with the outside world. His fascination with these animals led him to live in conditions that most people would consider terrifying. In the end, it was his passion for these dangerous creatures that caused his tragic demise. The community was left in shock after the details of Mark's death became public. Many couldn't understand why someone would choose to live in such a dangerous and unnatural environment. The removal of the animals from his apartment was a difficult and dangerous task, as each creature was more aggressive than the last. The authorities took great care in ensuring none of the animals harmed anyone during the process. Mark's story raised many questions. Why did he feel the need to surround himself with such dangerous animals? What drove him to collect them? Was there something in his past that triggered this obsession? Unfortunately, these are questions that will likely remain unanswered. This incident shows us the risks involved in keeping exotic pets. While some people find fascination and comfort in them, the dangers they pose are real. It's essential to understand that these animals require proper care and safety precautions. Keeping them in a home environment can put both the owner and the animals at risk. Animal welfare concerns were also brought to light in the wake of Mark's death. Gabby Bayer pointed out that these creatures should never have been allowed in a private residence. The conditions in which Mark kept his pets were far from acceptable, raising ethical questions about their treatment. Authorities took steps to prevent such a tragedy from happening again, highlighting the importance of responsible pet ownership, especially when it comes to dangerous animals. A compelling tale of greed, sorrow, and retribution unraveled in the sprawling, majestic landscape of Kruger National Park, where the vast African savanna rolls out like an unending tapestry under the expansive sky. Amidst the diverse tapestry of wildlife and the untouched natural beauty, human desires clashed with the brutal realities of nature, setting the stage for a poignant drama that echoed the timeless struggles of life and survival. It began with a man whose name has since faded into obscurity. He was a suspected rhino poacher, driven by the promise of profit and the temptation of easy riches. His life before Kruger National Park was shadowy, shrouded in mystery and speculation. Some whispered of a troubled past, others of a desperate present, but the truth remained elusive. With him were 4 accomplices, their faces obscured by the darkness of the night as they ventured into the heart of the wilderness. Their aim? To hunt the majestic rhinoceros, a creature whose very existence was threatened by the insatiable demand for its horn. Despite poaching being illegal, as rhinos are now critically endangered, people still wanted to hunt them for its high price, ranging from $27,000 a pound to $7,000 an ounce. It's $400 more expensive than gold. No wonder these poachers wanted to get deficient rhino horns. Armed with weapons and fueled by greed, they stalked their prey with a ruthless determination, heedless of the consequences that awaited them. But nature, with its sense of justice, had other plans. As they moved deeper into the park, their footsteps echoing in the night, fate intervened in the form of an elephant, a towering animal whose rage knew no bounds. With a suddenness that caught them off guard, the massive creature charged, its tusks gleaming in the moonlight as it unleashed its anger upon the interlopers who dared to trespass upon its territory. In the chaos that ensued, the suspected poacher met his demise, his life snuffed out in an instant by the brute force of nature's wrath. His companions, gripped by fear and panic, fled into the darkness, leaving behind the lifeless body of their fallen comrade. But nature's revenge was not yet complete. In the days that followed, a search party searched the wilderness for the missing man, their efforts hampered by the park's vastness and their quarry's elusive nature. Eventually, their perseverance was rewarded as they stumbled upon a gruesome scene that bore witness to nature's brutal efficiency. Amidst the undergrowth, they discovered the remains of the suspected poacher, picked clean by a pride of lions whose hunger knew no bounds. All that remained were a human skull and a pair of pants. As news of the tragedy spread, the park's managing executive, Glenn Phillips, offered his condolences to the family of the deceased, lamenting the senseless loss of life that had occurred. But even as he spoke, the wheels of justice were already in motion, as 3 of the suspected poachers' accomplices were apprehended and brought to justice. For them, as for their fallen comrade, the price of their crimes would be paid in full. But amidst the tragedy, lots of questions lingered, including, what drove these men to risk their lives in pursuit of rhino horn? And perhaps most chilling of all, what other horrors lay hidden in the depths of Kruger National Park, waiting to be revealed? What if their greed had not closed their eyes to the dangers that lurked in the shadows? What if they had heeded the warnings and respected the sanctity of the park? And what if, in the end, nature's retribution was a warning to us all? It was 2007 in Queensland, Australia. Pam Weaver, a 60-year-old woman with a passion for animals, was in her backyard. She had exotic pets, including kangaroos, goats, and a 10-month-old camel. The camel had been a birthday gift from her husband Noel and their daughter. Pam was known for her love of animals, and her family had considered buying her a llama or alpaca, but found those animals too expensive. Instead, they got a camel, which was more affordable in Australia due to the large wild camel population. That afternoon, Pam's daughter was inside preparing dinner when she noticed the camel wandering the yard alone. She immediately felt something was wrong. When she went outside, she found Pam lying motionless on the ground with the 330-pound camel standing nearby. Pam had marks on her face and arm, suggesting the camel had knocked her over, stomped on her, and then lay on top of her. Detective Craig Gregory arrived at the scene and suspected that the camel might have been acting in a playful or possibly inappropriate manner. Chris Hill, a camel expert, later explained that while young camels aren't usually aggressive, they can be dangerous if not properly trained. This particular camel had shown unusual behavior in the past, often trying to climb on other animals, including the family's pet goat. Noel Weaver was heartbroken over the loss of his wife, but found some comfort in knowing that Pam had died doing what she loved. At her funeral, attended by 300 people, Noel spoke about Pam's passion for animals and even expressed forgiveness for the camel. He told mourners, "You have to forgive the camel. He loved her very much." The investigation uncovered more about the camel's background. It had been raised by hand and was used to being fed by people, which may have led to its unpredictable behavior. Despite its size, the family never saw the camel as a threat, believing it was tame. Detective Senior Sergeant Craig Gregory shared that Noel first became worried when he saw the camel wandering alone. Pam had been cooking before going outside, as a fresh cup of tea was still on the table, suggesting she had only been out for a short while. The autopsy confirmed that Pam died from the camel's actions. She either suffocated when the camel lay on her or suffered a heart attack during the incident. Despite the tragedy, the family decided not to put the camel down. This decision was influenced by Pam's love for animals and Noel's belief that the camel didn't mean to hurt her. The incident shows the unpredictable nature of animals and the need for caution when interacting with them. Back in 2014, it was a beautiful evening at the Skukuza Golf Course, situated within the expanse of Kruger National Park. Jacques van der Sant, a 29-year-old with a deep-seated love for the outdoors, had returned to the park where he spent his early years, visiting his parents who worked there. As Jacques and a friend took to the golf course, their laughter echoed across the verdant expanse. Jacques was no stranger to adventure. Growing up within the beauty of Kruger National Park, he developed a profound appreciation for nature's wonders. His parents, Schalk and Laretha van der Sant, had dedicated their lives to preserving the park, instilling in Jacques a reverence for the wilderness surrounding him. Jacques and his friend kept playing golf until it was time to retrieve some golf balls in Lake Panic to continue their game. Although there were warnings, Jacques and his friend became curious about how many golf balls they could retrieve in the lake. Ignoring the warnings against swimming in the park's dams and rivers, he waded into the shallows, his friend following suit. Perhaps the nostalgia of his youth or the moment's thrill compelled him to venture into the water, heedless of the lurking dangers beneath the surface. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Jacques, a predator lurked in the depths of Lake Panic. Crocodiles, emerging from their winter hibernation, hungered for their first meal in months. With instinctual precision, one of these ancient reptiles, measuring nearly 4 meters in length, silently stalked its unsuspecting prey, its predatory gaze fixed upon Jacques as he reached into the water to retrieve golf balls. In an instant, the peacefulness of the evening shattered as the crocodile surged forward, its mighty jaws closing around Jacques' chest with bone-crushing force. The force of the attack was swift and merciless, dragging Jacques beneath the surface in a flurry of thrashing water. Paralyzed with shock, his friend could only watch in horror as Jacques disappeared beneath the murky depths. The night air was rent with the frantic cries of Jacques' companion, the sound echoing through the stillness of the park. Aligned with the unfolding tragedy, rangers sprang into action, their searchlights piercing the darkness as they combed the waters for any sign of Jacques. They scoured the depths for hours, their hearts heavy with dread as the minutes ticked. Finally, a glimmer of hope emerged, the silhouette of the crocodile, its victim trapped in its lethal embrace. With determination, the rangers aimed, their rifles echoing as they sought to free Jacques from the jaws of death. As the creature's lifeless body surfaced, the full extent of the tragedy became apparent. Once full of life and vitality, Jacques van der Sant had become another victim of nature's unforgiving wrath. His body was found without any signs of mutilation, except for the teeth marks that were present on his front and back. His untimely death shocked the tight-knit community of Kruger National Park, leaving behind sorrow and grief within his family and friends. In the aftermath of the terrifying incident, speculation ran rampant as to what had led to Jacques' demise. Some pointed to the reckless disregard for park regulations, citing the ban on swimming in the dams and rivers as a clear indication of the dangers hidden beneath the surface. Others questioned the efficacy of park management, raising concerns about predatory animals near recreational areas. What if Jacques had heeded the warnings against swimming in the park's dams and rivers, choosing to enjoy the golf course from a safe distance instead? The heart of South Africa's renowned Kruger National Park, Roland Kohler, a Swiss tourist, went on a journey filled with anticipation and wonder. It was a crisp morning in November 2019 when Kohler, a devoted anthroposophic physician, and his wife set out on a safari adventure through the sprawling wilderness of the park. Roland Kohler, a man of intellect and curiosity, had dedicated his life to pursuing knowledge and healing. As an anthroposophic physician, he embraced a holistic approach to medicine, viewing each patient as a complex interplay of mind, body, and spirit. His compassionate nature endeared him to all who crossed his path, and his thirst for adventure drew him to the beauty of Kruger National Park. With the sun just beginning to rise above the horizon, the couple navigated the winding roads between the Mopani and Shingwedzi camps, their hearts brimming with excitement at the prospect of encountering the park's majestic wildlife. Little did they know, their adventure would soon take a tragic turn. As they rounded a bend in the road, a convoy of minibus taxis thundered past, their drivers seemingly oblivious to the posted speed limit of just 30 mph. Witnesses later recalled the taxis hurtling down the roadway with reckless abandon, leaving a trail of dust and uncertainty in their wake. Amid this chaotic scene, fate intervened most unexpectedly. A giraffe calf, innocent and unsuspecting, wandered onto the roadway, unaware of the impending danger. With a loud screech of tires, tragedy struck as one of the speeding taxis collided with the gentle creature, sending it tumbling onto the path of Kohler's safari vehicle. The impact was catastrophic. The massive 18-foot, 650-pound giraffe crashed down upon the roof of Kohler's camper with bone-crushing force, shattering the serenity of the morning and changing the course of their lives forever. The vehicle was severely damaged, and Kohler suffered from critical injuries while his wife was only mildly injured. A total of 4 people, including Kohler and his wife, were injured in the incident. Amidst the chaos, emergency services raced to the scene, their sirens wailing in a desperate chorus of urgency. Paramedics worked tirelessly to stabilize Kohler, his injuries grave and his future uncertain. With a head injury and a mandibular fracture, his life hung in the balance as he was airlifted to Nelspruit Mediclinic for urgent medical care. However, despite the efforts of medical professionals, Roland Kohler's battle for survival would soon come to a tragic end. Several days later, on November 13, 2019, Kohler succumbed to his injuries at Netcare Millpark Hospital in Johannesburg. His passing shocked the tight-knit community of travelers and adventurers who had crossed paths with him in the expanse of Kruger National Park. In the aftermath of this devastating incident, authorities launched an investigation into the circumstances surrounding Kohler's death. Initially, a case of reckless driving was opened against the minibus driver. His actions were deemed a catalyst for the chain of events that led to the tragedy. However, with Kohler's death, the charge was elevated to culpable homicide. Sandparks, custodians of Kruger National Park, issued a reminder to visitors, urging them to exercise caution and respect the wildlife that called the park home. With speeding fines enforced and surveillance cameras poised to monitor the roads, the message was clear. There are no second chances in the realm of nature. Within the reflections and reminders, questions lingered in the minds of those who bore witness to the tragedy. What if the taxis had adhered to the speed limits? What if the giraffe wasn't there in the first place? In the heart of Kruger National Park, amidst its sweeping vistas and wild, untamed beauty, two women embarked on a journey destined to end in tragedy. Surrounded by the raw power of nature and the unpredictable wilderness, their adventure, which began with excitement and the thrill of exploration, took a sudden, heart-wrenching turn, marking a sobering reminder of the park's formidable and often merciless reality. The first woman, a seasoned employee of Sandparks, had dedicated her life to the protection and preservation of Kruger National Park. Born and raised in a small village on the outskirts of the park, her love for the wild was instilled in her from a young age. As a child, she would spend hours exploring the bushveld, her curiosity piqued by the myriad wonders hidden amidst the thorny underbrush. This deep connection to the land drew her to a career in conservation, where she could work tirelessly to ensure that future generations would inherit a world teeming with life. The second woman, a newcomer to Sandparks and an employee, had dreamed of escaping the concrete jungle in favor of the wide-open spaces of the African bush. This longing for adventure led her to Kruger National Park, where she hoped to immerse herself in the beauty of nature and make a difference in the world. As fate would have it, the paths of these two women would converge on a fateful day in the Muiplas section of the park near Mopani Camp. Tasked with a routine mission to harvest Mopani worms, they set out into the wilderness with purpose and determination. Little did they know that their journey would take an unexpected turn, plunging them into a nightmare they would never awaken. It began with a rustle in the underbrush, a faint sound that sent shivers down their spines. Sensing danger, the women paused, their senses on high alert as they scanned the horizon for signs of trouble. And then, like a bolt from the blue, the elephants appeared, their massive forms looming prominently against the backdrop of the savanna. In an instant, chaos erupted as the elephants, agitated by the presence of intruders, charged forth with a primal fury. The women, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught, scrambled for safety, their hearts pounding in their chests like the beat of distant thunder. But for one of them, escape was not to be. With a swift and brutal motion, the elephant's tusk pierced her flesh, carving a path of destruction from her lower back to her chest. The air filled with the sounds of her agony as she fell to the ground, her lifeblood staining the earth beneath her. Beside her, the other woman fought for her life, her body battered and broken by the relentless assault of nature's fury. Guided by armed rangers through the dense, untamed bush of Kruger National Park, a team of paramedics raced against time, navigating the rugged terrain desperately to reach the accident scene. Despite their relentless efforts and the urgency of their mission, they arrived too late for one of the women. She lay motionless on the ground, her life tragically cut short in an instant by powerful forces beyond anyone's control. The somber atmosphere was a stark reminder of nature's unforgiving strength and the fragile line between life and death in the wilderness. How might the outcome have changed if the women had chosen a different route through the park? Could earlier or more effective emergency responses have prevented the tragic end? Were there any overlooked warning signs that could have alerted them to the impending danger? How did their preparations, or lack thereof, impact their fate in the unpredictable wilderness of Kruger National Park? Reflecting on these questions might not only shed light on the circumstances that led to this heartbreak, but also serve as crucial lessons for future adventurers. Understanding these aspects can help emphasize the importance of preparedness, awareness, and swift action in the face of nature's unforeseeable challenges. On August 25, 2017, 31-year-old snake enthusiast Dan Brandon was in his bedroom in his Church Crookham, Hampshire home. Downstairs, his parents were cooking dinner. Dan was enjoying some time with his beloved pets, 10 snakes and 12 tarantulas. But then something happened. His parents heard a mighty crash, and Dan failed to answer their calls. When they opened his bedroom door, they were met with a horrifying sight. But what had happened? And could it have been prevented? Dan Brandon was known for his love of exotic animals, owning 10 snakes and 12 tarantulas. He had been keeping reptiles since he was 15 years old, so for 16 years. Dan was an experienced handler who knew the needs of each and every one of his pets. He loved his pets, but he had a particular bond with Tiny, an African rock python he had raised since it was small enough to fit in the palm of his hand. African rock pythons are among the largest snake species, known for their immense strength and occasional temperamental nature. They are non-venomous constrictors that kill their prey by coiling around and suffocating it. While they can become familiar with their handlers, they do not exhibit affection in the same way domestic pets do. These snakes are driven by instinct, which can sometimes lead to dangerous interactions with humans. Dan would often refer to Tiny as his baby, despite the fact that she was an 8-foot snake. Tiny's size and strength made her more unpredictable compared to his other pets. Despite occasional aggressive behaviors like hissing and pretending to strike, Brandon never felt threatened by Tiny. In recent times, however, he had stopped putting Tiny around his neck. Despite his experience and careful handling, his passion for these animals led to a tragic accident. It was the evening of August 25, 2017, and Babs Brandon, Dan's mother, was cooking dinner. Suddenly, she heard a crash from her son's bedroom, but assumed Derek had knocked something over. At about 7:15 that evening, Babs shouted that dinner was ready, but Dan didn't come down. Babs sent her husband Derek to check on Dan. Once again, he didn't answer. Upon entering her son's room, Babs found Dan lying face down on the floor. He was a little cold to the touch. Babs quickly assessed the room and noticed something. Tiny, Dan's African rock python, was missing from her vivarium. Paramedics were called but were unable to save Dan. Tiny was later found coiled up and hidden under a box in the room. Dan's parents were shocked and looking for answers. An inquest later revealed that Dan had died of asphyxiation, with pathologist Dr. Adnan al-Badri noting a hemorrhage behind one eye, burst blood vessels, and congested lungs. There were no bite marks or puncture wounds on Dan's body, nor specific signs on his neck muscles, indicating that the death was not due to aggression. Coroner Andrew Bradley concluded that Tiny had likely coiled around Dan either out of engagement or as a reaction to feeling scared, leading to accidental asphyxiation. Professor John Cooper, a reptile expert, confirmed that Dan was an experienced handler who would have known how to unwrap a python. Cooper examined Tiny and noted no scratches on the shed skin that would indicate a struggle, reinforcing the theory that the incident was not aggressive but rather a tragic misadventure. He emphasized that while African rock pythons can recognize their handlers, their actions are not based on affection but on instinctual responses. The tragedy highlighted the inherent risks of keeping large constrictor snakes as pets. Despite Dan's experience and care, the unpredictable nature of such animals can lead to fatal consequences. Dan's family sought answers to their questions, but the exact circumstances leading to Dan's death may never be fully understood, especially since some experts doubted that Tiny was responsible for her owner's death, especially considering that evidence was indeed limited. It was November 2011 in Free State, South Africa. Marius Els, a 40-year-old farmer and former Army major, had spent the last several years raising a unique and dangerous pet, a hippopotamus named Humphrey. Humphrey was no ordinary hippo. He had become an internet sensation with videos of him swimming with humans and being ridden by Marius. Marius often described Humphrey as being like a son to him. The bond between the two was extraordinary, but it was also a ticking time bomb. Humphrey had been rescued as a calf from a flood and was initially adopted by another family. However, as he grew, he became too large and unmanageable for them. That's when Marius stepped in, giving the young hippo a home on his 400-acre farm. He built a large lake for Humphrey, where the hippo could swim and live in a more natural habitat. Marius and Humphrey's relationship grew strong over the years. Marius would ride on Humphrey's back, feed him apples, and even brush his teeth. He was convinced that despite Humphrey's size and the inherent dangers, the hippo would never harm him. Neighbors, however, were not so sure. They had seen Humphrey wandering off the farm, sometimes onto a nearby golf course where he would chase golfers. There were also reports of Humphrey killing livestock belonging to Marius's business partner. Despite these warning signs, Marius remained steadfast in his belief that he had tamed one of the most dangerous animals in Africa. He often stated, "There's a relationship between me and Humphrey that some people don't understand. They think you can only have a relationship with dogs, cats, and domestic animals. But I have a relationship with the most dangerous animal in Africa." In early 2011, an incident occurred that should have been a serious warning. A 52-year-old man and his grandson were canoeing on the river that ran through Marius's farm. Humphrey spotted them and, feeling territorial, tried to chase them away. The man and his grandson were forced to climb a tree and stay there for 2 hours, until Marius arrived and lured Humphrey away with an apple. This incident showed the potential danger of keeping such a large and powerful animal as a pet. Despite these incidents, Marius continued to trust Humphrey completely. He believed that his unique bond with the hippo made him immune to the dangers that others faced. He often remarked on how Humphrey would respond to his calls and play with him in the water. Videos of Marius riding on Humphrey's back and interacting with him like a pet dog became viral on the internet, further fueling the fascination and concern from those who watched. On that day in November 2011, everything changed. Marius was found dead, his mutilated body submerged in the river where he had once rescued Humphrey. The paramedics who arrived on the scene reported that Marius had been bitten multiple times and had been in the water for an unknown period. Jeffrey Wicks, a spokesman for Netcare 911, confirmed the horrific details, stating, "Paramedics responded to the scene to find that the man had been bitten several times by the animal. It had also been immersed in the river for an unknown period." The news of Marius Elsa's death shocked the world. How could a man who had such a close relationship with an animal meet such a tragic end? Those who knew Marius were not entirely surprised. They had seen the warning signs and had tried to warn him, but he had always dismissed their concerns. One neighbor remarked, "We tried to warn him, but he wouldn't listen." Marius's wife, Louise, had also expressed her misgivings about keeping a wild animal as a pet. She knew the risk but could do little to change her husband's mind. Marius's confidence in his bond with Humphrey was unwavering, and he paid the ultimate price for it. Humphrey, the hippo who had been like a son to Marius, had turned on him. The hippo's natural instincts had surfaced, and the result was a tragic and brutal end for the man who had loved him. The incident tells us the dangers of keeping wild animals as pets, no matter how strong the bond may seem. It was early September 2011 in Sulawesi, Indonesia. Andre Lemboga, a 50-year-old man, was preparing to celebrate the Idul Fitri holidays. Andre lived on Batam Island, known for its scenic beauty and rich cultural heritage. To enjoy the festivities, he decided to visit Manado in North Sulawesi for 14 days. Andre owned 9 dogs, which he kept as pets. However, he left for his trip without arranging care for them, leaving no food or water. This decision would prove fatal. As Andre left for Manado, his 9 dogs were left behind. Without regular feeding, the dogs soon faced severe hunger and dehydration. Desperate for survival, they turned on each other. The weakest dogs became the first victims, providing a temporary, grim solution to their hunger. 14 days later, on August 30th, 2011, Andre returned from his trip. His luggage was neatly stacked outside his house. But inside, he faced a horrifying scene. His pets, now driven to madness by starvation, saw him as their next meal. In a brutal twist, the dogs attacked and killed him. Days passed without Andre's presence, raising suspicions among his neighbors. A neighborhood guard noticed the abandoned luggage outside Andre's house. The suitcases, left untouched for days, seemed odd. Growing concerned, the guard approached the house. A foul odor confirmed his worst fears. He immediately contacted the local police. When the police arrived, they were met with a gruesome sight. Andre's skull was found in the kitchen, while the rest of his body was scattered in the front part of the house. The dogs, having temporarily overcome their hunger, were still in the house. The officers quickly realized that the dogs were aggressive and territorial. As they attempted to enter, the dogs lashed out at them. The officers had no choice but to subdue the animals. 3 of the 7 surviving dogs were shot to prevent further attacks. The remaining dogs were captured and taken away, their fate uncertain. The news of Andre's death shocked the community. Neighbors, who initially dismissed the foul smell as a dead rat, were horrified to learn the truth. They expressed disbelief and sadness over the incident. The local police chief, Ariana, explained that the dogs attacked Andre because they were starving after being left without food for 2 weeks. The tragic death of Andre Lemboga reminds us about the importance of pet care. Leaving animals unattended without food or water can lead to unimaginable outcomes. It was October 4th, 2009, a Sunday, and Kellyanne Waltz was getting ready to clean Teddy's cage. Kellyanne had cleaned the cage thousands of times before, and she thought nothing of it despite the fact that Teddy was far from your ordinary pet. He was a bear. Little did Kellyanne know Teddy wasn't his usual self that day. Instead, he was more of an apex predator than a pet, and Kellyanne was just about to find out what that meant. Kellyanne Waltz, who was originally from Massachusetts, was a 37-year-old mother of two. The woman had always harbored a deep affection for animals. She even bred Old English bulldogs. After moving to Ross Township, Pennsylvania with her husband Michael Waltz, she became a trusted and important member of the community. She was a quiet and caring woman, well known and respected in her community. But the Waltz family weren't like their peers. They had a special interest that differentiated them. As such, when they moved to Ross Township, they acquired an 8-acre property on Dogwood. It was the area's natural beauty that first caught their attention because they knew the place would suit their needs. When they moved, the Waltzes brought their pets along, a variety of exotic animals. As a result, their house was a true menagerie that included lions, tigers, cougars, leopards, servals, Old English bulldogs, reptiles, and a black bear named Teddy, which the Waltzes had bought in 2000. Everyone in the community knew about the animals. Some feared them, especially those with young children, but others saw the animals as a local curiosity and a source of fascination. Over the years, the family's neighbors would bring the children to Kellyanne and Michael's house, and they would visit the animals under Kellyanne's supervision. The animals were kept in secure, sturdy outdoor cages, and Kellyanne dedicated herself to their care. Over the years, as the animals aged and passed away, the menagerie dwindled until only the mountain lion, the tiger, and the bear, Teddy, remained. It was a quiet Sunday when Kellyanne Waltz entered the 15 by 15-foot steel and concrete cage of Teddy to clean it. Teddy was a 350-pound bear, a creature that some would argue needed to be free. Before entering the cage, Kellyanne attempted to distract the bear by throwing dog food to one side of the enclosure. This was her usual trick, and it worked every time like a charm. Except this time it didn't. Something went tragically wrong. Teddy, frustrated and possibly influenced by the onset of hibernation instincts, turned on Kellyanne and attacked her. Kellyanne's young children saw the whole thing. Terrified, they ran to their neighbor Scott Castone's house for help. Scott, who was a school teacher, initially thought Kellyanne was being attacked by a wild bear. But then, when he realized it was Teddy, Scott rushed to the Waltz property with his .357 caliber handgun. He found Teddy on top of Kellyanne, who seemed unconscious. When Teddy noticed Scott, he began moving toward the man. Scott couldn't take any chances. He was a father and he valued his life. As such, he shot the bear in the head, killing it instantly. Scott then rushed to Kellyanne's side. She was unconscious and badly hurt. He called 911, but nothing could be done for Kellyanne. She was declared dead at the scene. The incident has left the community in shock, transforming what was once a place of wonder into one of mourning. After the incident, it was revealed that Michael Waltz's permits for keeping, selling, and displaying exotic animals had expired in June 2008, more than a year before the incident. However, the lapse was considered a minor violation and did not warrant the removal of the animals. Inspections in 2007 had not revealed any issues, and the cages were deemed secure. Kellyanne Waltz's funeral service, held at New Covenant World Outreach Church, drew a large crowd of mourners, reflecting the profound impact she had on those around her. Friends and neighbors remembered her as a devoted mother, a passionate animal lover, and a cherished member of the community. Tim Conway from the Pennsylvania Game Commission criticized the decision to enter the cage with a wild animal, emphasizing that such animals are not domesticated and can be unpredictable. It was July 17, 2006, in a serene neighborhood of Salem Township, Pennsylvania. That day, Sandra L. Piovesan, a 50-year-old woman who had a pack of 9 wolf-dog hybrids, entered the animals' caged enclosure. She loved the animals dearly, but the hybrids hadn't been their usual selves for the past year or so. They were restless, more aggressive. They had even killed one of the pack's older members. Unbeknownst to her, Sandra was in danger, the next target of an increasingly agitated pack. At that point, Sandra Piovesan had been keeping wolf-dog hybrids for about a decade. They are unusual animals, crossbreeds between domestic dogs and wolves. These animals often exhibit characteristics from both species, which means they inherit the natural aggression of wolves. While hybrids can sometimes be domesticated, they retain a significant amount of wild instincts, making them unpredictable and potentially dangerous. As such, experts generally advise against keeping wolf-dog hybrids as pets because they pose a serious risk to humans who can't always predict their behaviors and needs. Packs are even more dangerous, since each animal can and probably will fight for dominance. But what happens when the dominant figure is a human? Sandra was about to find out. The woman housed these hybrids in a large caged enclosure in her backyard, providing them with various toys and play structures, including a replica igloo, balls, and a plastic playhouse. The animals, some weighing between 70 to 100 pounds and aged 7 to 8 years, had never been spayed or neutered, leading to several litters of puppies over the years. Despite previous warnings from humane officers, Piovesan continued to keep and breed the hybrids, seemingly unaware of the impending danger. She loved the animals with all her heart, but she did not possess the necessary license from the Pennsylvania Game Commission to own these animals. Instead, she circumvented this requirement by obtaining state dog licenses. According to some of her friends, Sandra's passion for these animals stemmed from her claimed Native American heritage. But not everybody loved these animals the way she did. Instead, Sandra's neighbors were concerned and irritated by the presence of the hybrids. Sandra would sometimes feed roadkill to the pack, and the smell was more than unpleasant. Even more, rumor had it that the animals were unvaccinated against rabies and unneutered. To top things off, the animals seemed stressed and restless. Piovesan's dedication to her wolf dogs was evident to those who knew her. She often entered the pen to feed them, and even invited visitors to observe the animals, treating them as beloved pets. However, her supervisor, Connie Griswold, and others close to her, were unaware of the true nature of these animals until her untimely death. On the morning of July 17, 2006, Sandra was supposed to meet her daughter, Crystal, for breakfast. When she failed to do so, Crystal visited Sandra's home, only to discover Sandra's lifeless body within the enclosure. It was a gruesome scene. It appeared that Sandra had suffered extensive injuries from bites and claws and serious blood loss, which ultimately led to her death. When state police officers arrived at the scene, they noticed the wolf dogs were visibly agitated by their presence, moving in unison along the fence line of their enclosure, as if they wanted to attack. Given the potential danger, authorities decided to tranquilize and then euthanize all the animals to safely retrieve Piovesan's body. The autopsy, conducted by Dr. Cyril H. Wecht, confirmed that Sandra had died from the injuries inflicted by her pets. For the most part, those who knew Sandra were saddened by her death, but not shocked. Some of her friends had warned her about the potential risks. One of Sandra's closest friends, Brian Gallagher, speculated that the attack might have been triggered by a struggle for dominance within the pack, with one animal or more attempting to assert leadership over Sandra. The incident has underscored the critical need for stricter regulations and greater public awareness regarding the ownership of wolf dog hybrids and other exotic animals. On September 26, 2012, Terry Vance Garner, a 69-year-old farmer from Oregon, went out to feed his many hogs, something he did multiple times a day. This time around, though, Terry failed to return home. When his family went looking for him, they were met with a gruesome sight, right in the middle of the animals. Terry Vance Garner was a well-known figure in his community, described by his older brother Michael as a good-hearted guy. Terry was a Vietnam War veteran. His time during the war left him with deep psychological scars. Terry suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. He found solace in his farm and his animals, which were like a therapeutic sanctuary for him. Overall, the animals and the farm were his life, providing him with a sense of purpose and peace. Garner's dedication to his farm and animals was evident in his daily routine and interactions with the livestock. Despite an incident where a hog had bitten him after he accidentally stepped on a piglet, Garner chose to spare the animal, proving his compassionate nature. Domestic hogs are not as aggressive as their feral counterparts, but they too can pose significant dangers under certain circumstances. They have powerful jaws with strong teeth and are omnivorous, which means they can and will eat meat. Large adult hogs, such as those on Garner's farm, can weigh up to 700 pounds or more. Their sheer size and strength can make them dangerous, especially if they feel threatened or agitated. On the fateful day, Garner went out to feed his hogs but did not return. Hours later, a family member discovered his dentures and fragments of his body in the hog enclosure. They had to assume the rest of Terry's remains had been consumed by the hogs. Many of Terry's hogs were indeed huge, and it wasn't hard to imagine them inflicting serious injuries or even death to an unlucky person. Authorities were called upon the gruesome discovery, and an investigation was launched. The circumstances were, however, strange enough to make the investigation difficult. Coos County District Attorney Paul Frazier indicated that Terry might have suffered a medical emergency, such as a heart attack, which could have caused him to fall, making him vulnerable to the hogs. The alternative was sinister, something out of a horror movie. Terry could have been intentionally knocked over by the animals, leading to the fatal attack. Given the unusual nature of the case, foul play was not ruled out, although there was no direct evidence pointing to it. A pathologist was unable to determine the precise cause or manner of death, prompting further analysis by a forensic anthropologist at the University of Oregon. But there was a lack of definitive answers. As such, Terry's family had to deal not only with the man's death, but also with the possibility that they would never find out what really happened. Garner's life and untimely death underscore the unpredictable nature of working with livestock and the need for caution and respect when interacting with large animals, domesticated or not.